Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. I do apologize for the hiatus since the last episode. I was working on a large project with my friend Shenanigans over on the 42 Craft server, but we finally got that done. He should be making a video of that pretty soon, so I hope that when he does, you will check it out. But I am now back and I'm going to have some more time to be able to play GregTech. Now, in the last episode, I showed this biomass production line, which is making power by burning biogas. And my friend Ungod mentioned that I could also add additional distilleries and turbines to the setup to make more power. And that is what I've done. I now have 3 distilleries feeding into 3 gas turbines. But otherwise, this setup is the same. And again, the power is being controlled so that I always keep a base level of power in this battery buffer. But I have changed a few things, and some of them have to do with this electric blast furnace here. So the power from this biogas system does not go, the excess of which I should say does not now go into the electric blast furnace like I had before. Instead, it's going over here and it's going into these battery buffers, which are being used to power all of this electric machinery. So I'm no longer using steam turbines to generate electrical power for these machines. Instead, I'm using the electrical power off of the biogas. However, I do have it still set up so that when there is an excess amount of power, it will feed the extra amount of power into the electric blast furnace. So I'm still using the excess, but primarily I'm having it go into this machinery here. What I did instead was I decided to set up some more passive systems for generating steam. And I say that, but pretty much the only way you can do that is with the solar steam boilers, which is what I did. I went up here and cleared off some area, and I made these simple solar boilers. Yeah, it's not very pretty, but I made 8 of them, and they generate steam off of the power of solar. Not a big deal, but you know, it makes it so I don't have to constantly be feeding coal or charcoal into, I need to remove this, into the other steam boilers. So again, just a more generic way of producing, not a generic way, but a more passive way of producing steam so that I always have some amount of steam. Okay, so the steam comes down and it goes into this line, and you can see I've moved the steam machines. They're all here. It's the same kind of setup as before. They feed into the steam machines, and any excess steam is then fed into this basic steam turbine, which generates power when it has it, and will send it into the electric blast furnace. So I'm using excess steam to make power for the electric blast furnace, and when I have excess power from my biogas setup, it also goes into the electric blast furnace. And it is set up so that when this battery buffer is full, it will activate and turn on the electric blast furnace, so I can leave the aluminum dust in here, and it will only process it when it has enough power to do so. So that's very nice. I don't have to babysit it, which is cool. I still have these high pressure coal boilers. I don't use them all the time, but right now I am processing some redstone ore, and that of course requires more steam than when I'm not doing anything. So when I'm doing stuff here that requires steam, I can pop some charcoal into the coal boilers, and I get more steam for what I'm doing. So that works out really well. And that is the updates. That's where I am at with things. That's the few things that I've worked on since the last episode. The next thing I really need to do, I guess I could talk about this. I was electrolyzing some magnetite. And magnetite, when it electrolyzes, gives me iron dust and oxygen. And I'm just piping that oxygen into the electric blast furnace. You can see here I've got an input hatch which is right now currently full of oxygen. And that is because with oxygen in an electric blast furnace, you can smelt iron or wrought iron into steel. And it's really fast. Wrought iron is actually the best. It goes really, really quickly, but it requires that oxygen. So I don't use it all the time, but I do have it, and it is available. It makes it so that if I need a quick access to steel, I can. I am still using the good old faithful bronze-plated blast furnace. It makes steel much slower, but it does work well and doesn't require any babysitting, so that is nice. Okay, so that should catch us all up on what I've been doing. The next thing I really need to do is a lot of mining. I'm starting to run low on stuff. I need to go out and get some mining done, but I wanted to put out an episode, so I thought what I would do in this episode is to make a machine that is probably one of my favorite machines. It's not a big deal for the most part, but for me, I really like this machine. And the machine that I want to make is the extruder. And so there is a basic extruder which runs on low voltage power, but from my experience, the majority of the recipes in the extruder that the extruder can do requires at least medium voltage power, and a lot of them even require high voltage power. There may be some that require more than that, I'm not really sure, but they do require medium voltage power. There's only a small number of recipes that work on the low voltage. So to me, it doesn't make sense to even make a low voltage extruder. So I want to make the advanced extruder, the medium voltage extruder. So if we look at the recipe here, a lot of this is pretty basic. There's some copper nickel wire, and that's pretty easy. Copper nickel, again, is a alloy of copper and nickel. Simple stuff to make. Steel fluid pipe, that requires steel, we know about that. The medium voltage machine casing is made out of aluminum, and the medium voltage machine hull is aluminum, wrought iron, and copper cables. So that's easy enough. And then we have the electric piston. Aluminum plates, aluminum rods, aluminum gears, copper cables. The motor out of magnetic steel, aluminum, copper, and copper. So all stuff that we have and we can make, not a big deal. What is interesting here is that this needs good electronic circuits. And so far up to this point, the only thing that we've had to make are the standard electronic circuits. And if you remember, these require 2 NAND chips, a steel plate, and some copper cables as well. But the good electronic circuit is made in an assembler, and it requires an electronic circuit and 2 NAND chips. So it's basically 4 NAND chips to make this thing. So I need to make that, and I do believe, could be wrong, but I do believe that there is an achievement for making the good electronic circuit. So the first thing I need to do, I've got all the materials I think for this, but the first thing I need to do is make the regular electronic circuits. So again, that's the recipe for that. Pretty easy to do. Take those out, and in the assembly machine, 2 electronic circuits and 4 NAND chips, or 1 electronic circuit and 2 NAND chips will make the good electronic circuit. It does require either molten tin, molten soldering alloy, or something else. Let me see. It's tin, lead, or soldering alloy. Now, on here with the molten lead, the amount 144. 144 is equal to 1 ingot. So you can use 1 ingot of lead for this recipe, or half an ingot of tin for the recipe, or a quarter of an ingot of soldering alloy for this recipe. So basically you can make it any way you want. It's really interesting to me because I'm having the hardest time with lead right now. I have like no lead. I can't find it. It's evading me. So the fact that it would be more expensive to make these things with lead is even more of a reason for me to not use lead. Normally I would use a soldering alloy, but the problem that I have is this is the fluid extractor, and you put the ingot in here, it will turn it into a fluid, and then I have it set to send down to the assembling machine, but the fluid will just sit in here. So if I use a soldering alloy, I will have, half of a soldering alloy's worth of fluid in the assembling machine, and if I needed to use the assembling machine for something else, that required a fluid, I wouldn't be able to because that fluid would already be in there. So in other words, it would kind of maybe be wasted. So I'm going to go ahead and do this with tin, even though that's not the most efficient way to do it. But for me, it's going to work. So again, I put the tin in here. That will turn it into a fluid, send it down to the assembly machine. And then as you can see there, we have two good electronic circuits. And we take those out. And I guess there isn't an achievement for that. Well, there actually is an achievement for it. So that's interesting. Okay, sometimes what you can do is put something on the ground and then pick it up. All right, there we get the achievement. So I've got the achievement for better circuits. Incidentally, I did notice that there are a few achievements here that I don't have that I should have. And let's see, just as a real quick note here. This achievement here, fix all maintenance problems in a machine. I've done that. That's how I got my electric blast furnace running. So I'm not sure why I don't have that particular... Actually, I think I do know why I don't have that particular achievement. You can see that that achievement comes after upgrade your electronic blast furnace. I actually fixed all the maintenance machines, fixed all the maintenance problems before I upgraded my EBF. So I believe, and I could be wrong on this, and someone can correct me, somebody who has a better history of GregTech can correct me, but I believe that in the past, you would not be able to fix all of the maintenance problems until this point, and that's why the achievements are in this order. But that has changed with the soldering iron and the soldering that you can do to fix that problem. So somebody maybe in the GregTech world needs to look at changing this order of things, in my opinion. So at some point in time, I will have to make another multi-block machine and fix all the maintenance problems in order to get that particular achievement. But another one is this one here, which is crafting an LV energy hatch. And of course, I did that as well. I made 4 LV energy hatches as part of that electric blast furnace. And the only thing I can think of is that, again, it was an order thing. I may have made those LV energy hatches before I made the electric blast furnace. So probably a good thing. I probably need to read these achievements a little bit better. Not a big deal. I can always make another LV energy hatch at some point in time. And also just to show, I tried doing this and picking it back up, and I do not get the achievement. I already tried to do that. So it doesn't work for that particular thing. But anyway, I'm sure at some point in time I can make another LV energy hatch and get that achievement. So back to the extruder. We now have the good electronic circuit. Now, I have already made all of the parts for this. And so there they are. And I can go in here. And I can't do the auto recipe thing for some reason with GregTech. But we put in the parts like so. And this will give me the Advanced Extruder. Great. Great. Okay. Now, I'm going to need to put this somewhere and supply it with power, and that is actually going to be somewhat difficult because I have power coming from the biogas setup into this low voltage transformer. I'm going to need to tap into the line and somehow run it up and give myself some power. So I haven't planned that out yet. Let me figure out the best way I can do that, and I will be right back. All right, this is going to be a little convoluted and less than ideal, but I'm going to do it for now and try to make it work. But I'm going to run power coming off of the biogas up to here, and then I'll put the extruder on top of that. So that should supply power to the extruder. Is it supposed to look like that? That seems weird to me, but okay. It seems very strange. That's a weird texture. Okay, anyway, this is the Advanced Extruder. So I really like this machine. It requires a lot of power. If we look at the recipes here, go back to seeing what I was saying. Here you have a medium voltage recipe. Remember, to be a low voltage recipe, it would have to be anything under than 32 EU per tick or 32 volts. And So you can see there is one recipe, but if you look at a lot of the rest of them, they all require a lot more. So again, as I said, there are a handful of them that run on low voltage, but for the most part, it requires at least medium voltage. But you can see they require medium voltage and 1 amp. But what the extruder does is you have all of these extruder shapes. So there's plates and rods and wires and axe heads and rings and saw blades. There's just a ton of them there. And if you use this plate in the extruder in this spot, you can put the metal that you want to make, that particular item out of in this slot, and it makes the item. And as I said, this is one of my favorite machines because I just find it to really simplify my life as far as everything goes. So let's take an example. My hammer is about to run dead. I'm always using a hammer to do stuff with. So let's go ahead and make another hammer. So there is a hammerhead extruder shape. That's it right there. And what we need to make an extruder shape is 4 pieces of steel. So each one of these is a little bit expensive if you look at it in terms of steel cost. But, hopefully you get into a point where steel is pretty easy to make and pretty easy to come by, so it shouldn't be too bad. Plus, you don't really have to make all of these shapes. You can just make them as you need them. You'll find that you use some a lot more than others depending on what you're doing. But we'll take the steel like that, and we need to make something that's called, I think it's called a blank extruder shape. It's this one right here, or an empty shape plate. And I believe that's a file and a hammer. Empty shape plate, right? So you take that. And if you remember from a previous episode when I made this mold case, this casing mold, it's, kind of the same principle, same concept. And so each one of these extruder shapes is made with a wire cutters in just different configurations. So you can see like that and that and that. And so the hammerhead one that we want looks like so. And so that's easy to do. We put that there, wire cutters there, and now we have the hammerhead extruder shape. All right. So we'll take that out. And if you end up making an extruder shape that you don't want, you can throw it into a macerator and get back your 4 steel. So it's not a complete waste of steel. You get it back if you really need to. But basically, if you put that then into the extruder with, again, like I said, the appropriate number of ingots of whatever metal you want to make it out of, you're gonna make that item. So let's say I'm gonna make a wrought iron hammer, which is what I'm using. I'm gonna need 6 of them, and that of course is 54 ingots. So we'll run over here and go like this and have 6 wrought iron ingots. Now, one thing you're going to want to know about the extruder is while it is convenient, at least as far as I'm concerned, I find it to be very convenient. As I said, it's one of my favorite machines. It does use a lot of power, and I do mean a lot of power. So this hammerhead, for example, if we look in here in the recipes and go to wrought iron there, you will see that it requires 43,000 EUs to make this hammerhead. There's just no other way to say it. That is a lot of power. It requires a lot of power. It's probably not a machine that you're going to want to use unless you can, supply that amount of power. At this point with my power production, I'm really not in a position to be able to supply that much power. Really not. But there are many ways that this extruder, once you do have the power production, is really useful. Again, here it is, it makes a hammerhead. You could say, well, hammerheads are not that hard to make. It's just, 6 ingots and the hammer. But it also means you're not using up the durability of a hammer. You don't have to do it in a crafting table. For example, on the rods, if you put an ingot in through an extruder shape for the rod shape, you get 2 rods. When you use the lathe, you get 1 rod and 2 small dusts of whatever that metal is. So this is a little bit better because it doesn't require you to have to, take those extra dusts and then reform them back into an ingot or, a full dust and then, put it into a furnace to get your ingot back or anything like that. So that's kind of, fairly useful. You have the casing, The casing is nice because it does give you 2 casings for each ingot. So the casings we've been making before in the alloy smelter, where 2 ingots give you 3 casings. In other words, it's a 1.5 to 1 ratio. Here it becomes a 2 to 1 ratio. And so that's always nice. That's probably the only thing that gives you any type of savings. You know, you can use the extruder to make wires. It's a lot more power than just using the wire mill, so it's not really useful for that. But if you got to a point again where your energy production was high enough that you didn't care, you know, you might have a situation say, well, instead of having a wire mill and, so you can also make plates. Here are the plates. It's 1 ingot is 1 plate. Again, instead of having the metal bending machine to make plates and the wire mill to make wire and the lathe to make rods, you could have just 1 extruder to make all of those items. So there is some usefulness to it. As I said, it is my favorite machine because I find it to be so useful. I hate having to make all the different products. The hammerheads, maybe not so much, but as it shows here, you can make the pickaxe head. You drop that into the extruder with 3 of the appropriate ingots. If you want to make a shovel, you drop that in with 1 ingot, axe heads, with 3 ingots. And you don't have to remember the particular recipe that it's 2 plates and an ingot with the file and the hammer here, or with the pickaxe that it's, a plate, and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to remember the specifics. You don't have to use durability and a hammer and a file. You can just drop the ingots in to the extruder and make what you need. So I do find it to be very useful. That's why it's one of my favorite machines, but it is a power hog. It is an energy hog, and it does require a lot of power. So as I mentioned earlier, lead has been eluding me. I'm having a really hard time with lead. I have some galena ore, but I need to make a medium voltage electrolyzer in order to get the galena ore. So I'm going to have to work on that next. Probably should have made that before I made an extruder, to be honest with you. But, I just didn't want to worry about it just yet. Anyway, point being, I'm having a hard time. I don't have enough lead to make the battery alloy to make a medium voltage battery. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal the medium voltage battery from the electric blast furnace, and I'm going to use it over here in the extruder so I can show how this thing works, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, re-enable it in the machine. There we go. So now it's running, and it will, create the hammerhead. There's nothing magical about the machine necessarily, but I really like it, again, because it does make making things really simple. So that pops up here, and boom, there's the hammerhead. It's just like the normal hammerhead, and you stick it onto the end of a stick, and you will have a hammer. Perfect. Another thing I didn't mention with the extruder is it has shapes for the various pipes. There are tiny pipes, small pipes, normal pipes, large pipes, and huge pipes. So you don't have to remember the recipes for these. But anyway, that's enough going on and on about that. That's the extruder. I made it a little bit early on, but again, it's a machine that I do really like. All I need to do is get a battery for it, and once I put that battery in there, everything will be fine. But I do need to work on that. But that is going to do it for this episode. I really just wanted to get an episode out to let you guys know that I'm here. And in addition, while I am here, I would like to say thank you. I have noticed the other day that I have reached 500 subscribers. And believe me, when I started making YouTube videos a number of years ago, I did not think that I would ever have 500 subscribers. So thank you all very much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them for me in the comment section below. Give me any ideas, any tips, any tricks that you might know. Give me any suggestions what I should do next. Yes, I know I need to work on an electrolyzer, a medium voltage electrolyzer, and I will do that. But any other ideas on what I can be doing, because the next thing is I need to make more and better power. So if you have ideas on what I could do next to make more power, more MV power specifically, let me know that as well. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.